Mental illnesses are a thing, they're real and they're very present, and we need to talk about them.
Okay, so mental illness, it is a sickness of your mind rather than of your body, right? It's very similar in a lot of ways to the things that we experience in other parts of our body. A lot of times it has to do with chemical imbalances or the way things are routed in your brain. But it's also a lot of times experiential, right? And I think sometimes that's part of what makes it hard for people to get their arms around. But if you think about it, it's like if you're in a car accident, right? That's a physical external trauma, but it manifests in your body. The airbag goes off, right? And you have burns on your face or whatever, right? So you have physical impact, physical scars or physical injuries from this external thing that happened. Mental illness sometimes can be like that too, where you go through, you have an experience, whether it's you've experienced some kind of violence, or you've been in a bad relationship, or you were the victim of a crime or abuse or something like that. And that, much like it can cause a physical injury, can also cause mental injury. Mental illness to me is as much a physical manifestation as it is a spiritual or emotional manifestation. And I think if people could make that comparison more easily and go, it's like taking care of my body, taking care of my mind, that would help with the stigma problem for sure. I think one of the other perceptions that we struggle with is somehow that having some kind of mental illness or struggling with your mental health means you're broken in some fashion, that you're not a whole person, or that there's something wrong with you. And there's not. It's in our brains, it's in our spirits, and it's as much of our health as, whether or not we have good blood pressure or we're dealing with a head cold. It's the same thing. We just, for some reason, we can't get to a point today yet where we can think about them in the same way. And so because it makes people nervous and it makes them uncomfortable and it makes them afraid, it becomes a thing that we don't talk about, and not talking about it keeps it a thing that people are uncomfortable and afraid about. So it's a cycle that perpetuates itself, and the only way we shift that, the only way we change that, is for people who go through this, people who experience it firsthand or secondhand, share those stories and are willing to say, you know what? It doesn't mean I'm broken. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm incomplete. It's just a part of who I am, like the color of my hair and the color of my eyes and the fact that I like pop music. I mean, it's just part of who we are.
So our main focus around this project is stigma,
right.
And we would like to know how you define stigma.
Stigma is fear, shame, and I think it's ignorance in some fashion, so that people feel marked. But it's like a scarlet letter. It's feeling like no matter what you do or where you go or who you talk to, this thing about you, this thing you're experiencing, this thing that you go through or have gone through, is marked on you like a bright red letter A. And everybody sees it and everybody judges you for it. It's people fearing something they don't understand and then being afraid to learn about it so that they aren't afraid of it.
So how would you define stigma?
To me, stigma is something that's been given an unfair and negative connotation.
What do you think causes most of this stigma?
I think a lack of education and understanding. The unknown is scary. They aren't teaching enough in schools and other places how to handle when someone seems really depressed, or someone's all of a sudden lost a ton of weight, or someone seems to be showing these signs, and before it gets any worse, they haven't, I don't think we as a community have done anything to really educate and teach people how to notice the signs.
I'm Shannon, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mental disorders I've been diagnosed with over the years. The first thing I got diagnosed with was ADHD, which is pretty common. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I got diagnosed around the end of my freshman year of high school. The next thing I got diagnosed with was depression, and I've had depression, battling it for 6 years. I got prescribed Zoloft, which seemed to really help, but I came to the realization that you can't just get better through medication. You have to go to therapy, you have to talk about your feelings, find coping skills, and that seemed to help me a lot. The next thing I got diagnosed with was an anxiety disorder, which I got prescribed Abilify for, which I'm no longer on. I was getting a lot of panic attacks and just was really anxious all the time, but I seemed to get better with that. And then the next thing I was diagnosed with was insomnia, which I can date back to like middle school. I always had trouble sleeping, and right now I'm getting off trazodone, which is the sleeping medication I've been taking, and I'm doing a lot better with my sleeping. And most recently I have discovered that I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and these are also mental disorders. Substance abuse. There's no real medication you can take for it, but I go to therapy, which helps a lot, and I go to AA and NA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. At first I thought you had to be much older to have these issues, or I didn't think that it resonated with me, but it turns out it does. And next month, July 17th, I will be a year sober. I've seemed to do a lot better. I've put in a lot of effort. I went to 2 treatment centers. One was in the wilderness. I lived outside for 3 straight months. I mean, no indoors. And so that was real, super helpful. Then I went to a second treatment, which was in Asheville, North Carolina, and it was wilderness and residential based, so we got a little bit of hiking in and camping, but we also had activities to do at base, at the campus, I guess, and that was really helpful too. And for the past almost 6 months I've been living in sober living, and that's been super helpful.
I'll speak from personal experience. I went through clinical depression when I was 19, and part of the reason that I got involved with youth suicide prevention is because I was suicidal when I was a teenager. And for me it was, I didn't feel like I could tell people that I was struggling because I was a good student and I was a good girl and I had friends and I had a good family, and I couldn't perceive that there were things in my life that should be so bad that I should feel depressed. And so I didn't feel entitled to have the feelings that I had. I didn't feel entitled to say, it sucks right now and I don't feel good and I don't like the way I feel and I need help. I didn't know how to do that. And so I will say that I did experiment with alcohol mainly because it was a way for me to not feel anything. MIT does this really awesome thing. They have been experiencing a large number of suicides, an abnormally high number of suicides for their campus. And so they started looking at all the pressures and things that were happening on campus. And one of the things that they said they realized they needed to do was to normalize for their entire school culture that what they do there academically is really hard, and that you don't have to pretend, it's easy. And so what they've tried to do is create a culture in their school. They have a slogan now, and it's a hashtag that they're using all over their campus, and it's "We all struggle together." And I love that message. One of the stories that I've been told that really resonated with me was there's a guy, his name's Kevin Himes, you should look him up. He's one of the few people that survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. Like, broke every bone in his body, totally traumatic, but he survived, right? And he goes around the country and he talks really candidly about his experience and what happened that day and why he jumped and all of this stuff, right? And obviously he's got some underlying mental illness issues, but he's candid about it, and he's in treatment, and he's okay, right? You know, he has a family, he lives his life. He's such a great example, you know, because he owns it, it's part of who he is, but it doesn't make him less or different or worse or anything. It's just part of who he is. But when he tells the story of the day he jumped, he talks about how, and forgive me because I'm probably paraphrasing a little bit, but essentially he said, you know, the day I went to the bridge to jump, I was kind of making deals in my head, right? Like, if somebody asks me if I'm okay, I won't jump. If somebody, you know, says hi to me, I won't jump. If somebody smiles at me, I won't jump. But I was so struck by that. And not because I think it was, you know, on the people around him to know that that was what was in his head, right? To save him, right? To save him from doing this thing, which he was clearly serious about because he jumped. But it reminded me that even if you never exchange a word with another human being, if you just look at them and you smile, what kind of a difference can that have on somebody's day, on somebody's life, on somebody's outlook, right? It's a smile. How hard is that?
If you could say anything to anybody struggling or trying to get help, what would you just tell them?
Be kind to yourself and never, ever, ever be afraid to ask for help.